Welcome to How Women Inspire. Our guest today is a venture capitalist, but really what she's known as a AI expert, professor, board director, and she's an advocate for diversity and AI for good. She's the founder and managing partner of Sancus Ventures, investing in the next gen software infrastructure of AI, artificial intelligence, and blockchain. She is an applied AI adjunct professor at Carnegie Mellon University. She joined Alibaba as employee number 84 and first head of product. She's led global product and engineering organizations in public companies and tech startups. She's an inventor with 5 US patents and a speaker at the UN and the UK House of Lords about AI and education. Boy, this is a hot topic, right on the money, and I'm so glad to have you with me today. Lake Dai, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Julie. I've been a member of How Women Leads for over 2 years, maybe even 3 years now. So big fan, and then it's a great community. Thank you for driving all this for us.
Well, I'll just say, like, you are so brilliant and so big-hearted and such a great gatherer. I love all of my interactions with you, and you're the kind of role model leader that we all need. So thank you for everything that you do. Well, let's start with some fun, actually. I'd love to hear sort of when you have the good days when you need to celebrate the wins, or even the tough days. Do you have the Lake Dai theme song?
What a wonderful day.
Oh, nice. Excellent. That you're just resetting your frame for the day. Is that what you're doing? All right. So AI and the implications of maybe not building it well are sort of all over front page news. Can you give us sort of your perspective on this? And how do we make sure that we're protected as people and as companies?
Yeah. So nowadays, I think it's really hard to go through a day without some people talk about ChatGPT, right? So everyone's been using it, and everyone's talking about it. And there's also split view of how we should face this challenge. But first, let's talk about, one of the terminology called AGI. So what is AGI, right? So AGI refers to artificial general intelligence. So when we talk about ChatGPT, and then we talk about a lot of AI application used today, we call them a narrow AI, which means that you're using AI for one specific goal. But AGI, or we're going through this called a strong AI, or we're really referring that the AI system can take tasks as human can do. So that brings a lot of interesting subject here is that how can that potential that can significantly change the world that in various ways, both positively and negatively, right? The first thing that we have seen so far, as many of us have been trying using ChatGPT, is that, it really increases efficiency and productivity. It can optimize the process, summarize the content for you, rewrite. I was chatting with Julie a little bit, is that I have my bio written for years, but it doesn't hurt to have ChatGPT to do some grammar check and then kind of improve it, right? So last weekend, my family thought about maybe we should do a short trip for my son's spring break. And we just asked ChatGPT, what is the 30 miles radius? What the best place? And make it teen friendly and make a 2-day recommendations, including hotel, restaurant. And it spit out in just 30 seconds. So
Wow.
we have seen people using it many different ways. We have people enterprise usage for summarize all the data. Imagine that your company sales organization running for 10 years, you just want to read all the spreadsheet and summarize what's the most important trends for revenue and gross profit, EBITDA, right? So those are all very efficient productivity tools. And in addition to those productivity tools that we have seen right now, we can also see that the AI right now play a very important role in the new scientific breakthroughs. If you think about scientific research, So as a professor, and one of the things we have to pay attention to is all the papers that's been
Yeah,
written.
literature reviews nonstop, right?
Well,
Yeah.
many of them, right? So if you ever written or read those papers, just tons of them there, right? So how do you summarize it, find out the right points, what is relevant, and keep you on track of what's happening? It's really important for us. And the second thing is it can lead to discoveries as well, right? So if you think about medicine, you think about climate science, there's a lot of information that right now, if you look at it in a holistic view, and sometimes it will really help you to speed up the innovation.
You feel like you're able to find, like, let's say there's a puzzle and you have 10 pieces. There's one piece in Bangalore and there's another piece in Toronto and there's another piece in Mexico City, like, and that if you can use AI to get, is that how it's working these days or not quite that way?
Yeah, so well, first of all, I think the information nowadays are massive amount of
Yeah,
information.
sure.
No way that we can keep up to it. And where all the information are kept in different locations, assuming that AI have access to this information can really help you. Like you said, let's say if I want to do initiative for, let's say, climate change, right? So it would be really good to see that what are the research or what are the industry applications happening in different geographic area. In addition, I think, when we talk about not only just scientific research or enterprise innovations, if you think about education, it's the same thing. So in the information we have today are scattered in different places. I got a request from a friend of mine said, look, like we're a nonprofit organization. We're trying to find volunteers for the kids that in the rural area in some of the countries in India, in China, and in Latin America. So we're looking for volunteers volunteer, let's say 1 hour a week to answer any technology or science questions they may have. And one of us is like, why wouldn't we just use ChatGPT, right? Then you have that kind of tools to help you to speed up the education. We call it assisted learning, really revolutionize education by providing personalized learning experience and addressing knowledge gaps and really improve the access to education.
Yeah. So I hear this as like, these are the positive things. These are the things that we should all be getting our arms around. What are the things that we should be concerned about, or the things we should be doing to make sure that we don't have bad outcomes, depending on how you, yeah, I only know enough to be dangerous. Like, so tell me, because I know as a board member, that's something that's really important to you that you're bringing to the table.
Well, I love that you asked that question, right? Because so many people just looking to the bright side only and not thinking about what are the potential downside. Well, a couple of things, right? So we talk a lot about AI safety because we really want to make sure the AI system align with human values or the right human values. And the challenge we currently have is that, we have among the scientists, we ask the question is that when will AI have its own consciousness, right?
Yeah.
And while we develop this really powerful tool, imagine, it could be a new nuclear weapons that you develop, and it really ends up so who do you hand it to, and what is that being used for, right? Before we have a good idea as to what we are really developing, how advanced this technology is, and how it's going to work with people, and who is it going to work with? And then we really are taking some potential risks. And then you probably see this on the news is that, people can prop the system, the model to say some improper things, right?
Yes, sure, of course.
Yeah.
But we can anyway without AI. I'm sorry. You're gonna say inappropriate, stupid things. People are saying them all day long.
Yeah, but it's really hard to
Yeah.
define what's real or not real, right? So let's say this is a podcast that I won't be able to share the pictures, but there are some news photos that you can really just create it and say, so and so got arrested or there's something happening. In a world with so much engineering information spreading around, this is really speed up the process. You can create fake images, you can create fake news that in a second. And
Yeah.
the other function, I know many people haven't used it, is that let's say if you write a blog, first of all, you can ask GPT to write a blog for you, right? Let's say Julie wants to say, what is the best way to push for diversity in the boardroom? and it can really write a blog for you. And you just say, well, make a linking post. And they will actually create emojis, short linking versions with all the hashtags. And you can just say, create a 10 tweets for me. And they will break up into 10 tweets for you, right? So you can really create some content in a second. And we have so much content already. Imagine this is going to increase the volume by 100% or more, right? 100x.
Well, it also is are the way to filter the information, right? It's
Yeah.
both. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a whole conversations about, okay, with this so much going on, so maybe we need AI for AI, which means that we need AI system to identify what is generated content created by human, what is created by AI, and maybe AI created so much information we need AI help us to filter. So it would be funny that, they say, Julie, you create those blogs and the linking posts and tweets, and I use the AI systems to summarize for me. And maybe we'll just have one conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So going back to the board, I think there are two areas I can see that we're still behind.
Yeah.
One is regulation and governance, because I think the government and organizations still need to understand this process. Same as a board. So how do we enhance digital literacy,
Yeah.
right? How do we enhance our knowledge, proactively understanding, embracing what's the new technologies? How do we adopt new technologies? What's the upside and downside? And to do so, the first thing is we need to look into that board composition. We have the right talent, right? Do we have members? We talked about this for years. We need a diverse background, so including expertise in technology, cybersecurity, and AI. And the other thing is that, people always say, we don't have enough women, right, on the board, and particularly when you talk technology. I can share one data is that I am leading the technology experience group and the Stanford Women on Boards. Just on the Stanford alumni alone, we have over 600 women identifying themselves as technology leaders and board directors. So you're telling me you can't find them, right?
Yeah.
So I think this is really the good time for the board to look into that. If you are going to add new board members to increase diversity in technology, cybersecurity, and AI, we have a good talent pool.
Yeah.
Talk to Julie, talk to me, talk to any other organizations, that you will be able to find the talents.
I'm not asking for permission anymore. I'm not asking for a seat at the table. My friends, this is the first generation of us. We have a huge opportunity. We have power and influence and wealth. And we can start building the tables where we get the prime seats. Today, we want to invite you to join us as investors in venture. I know no one's asked you to do it before. It might be something that seems scary or foreign, but I promise you it's not that different than investing in a mutual fund where your retirement funds are. I want you to lean in and just learn a little bit more. How about making a commitment that in the next 12 months, you can give yourself 12 months to figure it out and to take a step. I want to invite you to be part of the new table of power and influence and wealth. You're invited. I want to sit at the table with you because we're going to make big change. We're going to make the world we've been dreaming of. Really, to me, this is called maybe a crisis of the day, but if boards don't get their arms around this, they could have a big area of risk that they haven't covered. I think in some cases for people, it crept up on them. I think with ChatGPT in December, all of a sudden the world turned upside down, I think is what it feels like, right?
Yeah.
All of a sudden, before it was just like people would say, oh, there's risks because of facial recognition, with AI, right? That for different racial ethnicities. And I think it's now a whole new conversation. And
this is going to completely possibly shake up the entire business model of your company, right? So let's imagine, let's say, regardless in healthcare, you in digital marketing, right? So it used to be there are companies that creating a marketing campaign, create a campaign for you, but now that people actually can just do by themselves. They can create the campaign content. E-commerce is the same thing, that you have whole thing that AI written product descriptions, but also reviews, right? How can you tell what's right, what's wrong? what kind of legal risk you put yourself in. And so those are really, really important. Number one, the business model, is your business model still relevant?
Yes.
Number two, what are the potential risks and the competition you're facing, right? You're going to have new group and new competitions and startups that can leverage AI that compete directly with the business you built decades ago. And number three, and in terms of workforce retention, right? So are you changing your workforce because of the new technology? If you do, what kind of changes? The cybersecurity, legal risk, and all the things associated with it. And if you say, okay, none of them is relevant to me, but I was still going to say, well, what if your worker are using ChatGPT? What if they are using sensitive information, let's say performance reviews, which including revenue information and very sensitive information, and that all may potentially feedback to the model, can be revert engineered. What if your, let's say, what if your developers are using Copilot product, which potentially could be violating some the IP, can be IP infringement, right? Or whatever you put in their code yourself, that could be reverse engineered. So those are all the risks that
They're really huge questions. Like, I mean, those I feel like I just like all of a sudden my radar's going off on all these meetings I need to have with people. So you're the professor, you're the professor of AI. If I want to get more knowledgeable about this as a board director or a VC, you and I are both venture capitalists. How do we get up to speed enough? Is there a definitive, should I just use ChatGPT or, to figure out sort of what I need to know and what the risks are? Like, how do I make sure that I'm getting up to speed on all of this?
Yeah. Well, so a couple of things. Number one is that I think either as a board or as a nonprofit organization, we should hold those talks and panels and invite experts to share with us, particularly recently, because as we get onto ChatGPT 3 and then next day, a few months, and the 3.5, and that's 4, and then a couple of days ago, that's Auto GPT that kind of integrate everything. So we need to catch up, right? So having an expert or expert panel to share with the organization is really, really important. And the second thing is that we don't have all the answers, and even all the academic and the scientists, that we don't have all the answers, but it's good to have awareness at the boardroom to ask the right questions. Are we looking at this right now, right? So for example, what I just mentioned, that people may think about business model, but may not have thought about their workers as being using ChatGPT. Do they need to manage the access? So now, led by some European countries and some large public companies, and the CTOs are actively looking, should we block GTP, right? Should we give permissions to specific level? For example, executives and CEOs, you're not allowed to use it, right? All the information you have been using might be confidential, but you can also block them forever, right? So how do you get the right access? That's a big question that you should ask the IT department. So how do we ask the right questions, right? So again, that we're always going back to a couple of things. For a nomination committee, should we look into our current board composition? I will have the right expert in the team. If not, what is the recruiting process? And are we talking to any potential partners, experts, consultants, right? So what's the process? And are we looking to business divisions? How does that impact our strategy? And do we have a technology strategy? Do we have a team that monitor the technology risk? How do we evaluate risk? So audit and risk committee should probably come up with this as well. How do we look into other potential risk from different directions, and how do we rate them right now, right? And then we also look into the innovation as well, right? So are we encouraging innovation within the organization? And then are we engage our stakeholders, customers, employees, regulators, and investors, right? To see what they're moving as well. And then in long term is that how do we make this sustainable? Because everything is changing so fast, right?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, this is fascinating as a manager and certainly as a board director. Let's talk about venture. I've seen a couple articles that say, oh, it's overblown. We're pulling off from, investing in blockchain or AI, which, how could really? But I'd love to hear your thoughts about, I got a proposal for or a pitch from somebody pretty like a couple days after ChatGPT came out saying, oh, we'll create a personality avatar. And I'm like, wait, that's literally all you're doing is selling me what ChatGPT already does. Uh, so
Yeah. So let's talk about it from investor perspective, right?
yeah,
So,
yeah,
so it's interesting because last year was all about Web3 and everyone's rushing to generative AI. So what I have seen is not only just OpenAI, there are so many organizations that release their version of GPT. So all in a sudden, there are so many APIs available and it's heaven for startups, right?
yeah,
So you have an idea and then you can play with the APIs, you can create something overnight.
yeah,
And in the past, you may need those super engineers to help you to code, to give you, a lead and compared to others. But now you also have GitHub Copilot. You can really speed up the coding and product launch process significantly. So we're going to see a lot of startups right now. So everyone has an idea now, can possibly turn into something very quickly.
yeah,
Then the question from investor perspective is that, okay, so if that's the case, what's your moat, right? If everyone have the same access to all the APIs and everyone has maybe just need a regular developer, don't need a super developer, can create something that is productive. So what is really your moat? Is your insight of the industry? Is your connection? Is your able to sell? And how can you defend their barrier of entrance, right? So that's the first question is on competition. Is that the barrier is so low, entrance barrier is so low, then how do you defend
yeah,
yourself?
yeah, exactly.
You can't just say my mode is I run fast. I've seen a few startups said that, and
I know,
it's
me too.
right. So that's the first question. The second question is that, well, if everything you build is based on those APIs, let's say ChatGPT, right? Which a lot of startups are using right now. What prevent OpenAI to say, well, I'm going to change the pricing model,
Yeah,
or I'm going to reduce the amount of data that you can use, or I can charge by the data you use. And all of a sudden, your business model is changing,
yeah,
right? So that is on the supplier side, I think is also high risk.
yeah.
Of course, that people say I can use open source and now I can use other things they don't charge right now, but is it permanent? Do you know that? Do you have any control of that?
Yeah.
So that's another question I think is still unclear right now.
This is fascinating. Thank you so much. Like, can we back up and talk a little bit about you though? How did you get started? And you really are one of our nation's most important leaders in this space. What was the genesis of this? Is it when you were a kid? Are you just always been tech forward? Like, what is your starting
Oh,
point?
yeah, so that's going back to childhood. So yes, I was born in an engineering family. So,
Yeah.
so
So you
my
had no choice. You couldn't.
so my grandfather, my grand aunt, my grand uncle, all those were professors of top technology universities. So yeah, but I never expect myself to be a professor. And as a kid, I always want to be different because everyone was every single one was an engineer. Go to the family weddings and you have like over 100 people. Everyone's an engineer. Um, so I wanted to be different, but I think at the end of the day,
You are different, honey. And yet, at the end of the day, that's your
yes,
skill you had.
yeah, still go back because this is something, as a teen, you want to be different. And as you continue to grow, and I discover I always have the inherent passion for technology. And I also have this inherent passion for teaching because the impact you could make as a student, right? So when they're still trying to discover what's really important for them in life and then what are the values and what are technologies are really, really meaningful.
Yes.
And I think, when we talk about earlier that, how if AI is a big, important, powerful weapon you want to hand to somebody, you want to make sure that person is mindful. You want to make sure that person has compassionate, right? So you want this person want to use this technology for good. That's something that we have not really putting as focus as education system. at least in higher education,
I
because we
love
just
that.
focus on teach people the skills, right?
I didn't really realize I should have known that you, because of who you are with your big heart, your commitment to making a difference in the world, I should have known that you were marrying those two. But it sounds to me like it's much more than I thought, right? You really are bringing forward how do you use it for good as very much is that the name of your course or is just embedded in everything you talk about?
It's always part of my passion, and I slowly discover those compass in my life is that I'm always passionate about I want to be intellectually challenged, but I also want to make positive impact. I learned it early on in my life, in my 20s, when I was working at Alibaba and then when I was, a volunteer as teacher in those rural area. I realized that when you give, you actually receive more. It's I mean, Julie, you're doing this all day long. You've been giving, 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 and you just feel like so much your
Yeah.
life is so much richer when you're making impact and helping people. Although, always come to is how much bandwidth you do you have,
Yeah,
right?
of course. Yeah, you're
But
involved in a lot of things. I didn't know that you were leading that for Stanford, so that's fantastic. And so you're on a number of boards. Is that what you bring to the boardroom as this sort of how do you balance out the heart and the head, if you will, or is that are you always a technologist on the board?
yeah, so I think when we're looking at the candidates and you kind of stick out for some of the labels, right? Then in search, we call the metadata. You have all different vectors,
Yeah,
how you are labeled. I think I was labeled number one as the AI and technology expert because of the CMU AI professor role. And then the second label I got quite often was the global expert because in my I had 20 years operating role before I moved to the VC role and educator role. And I spent my time that helping the company to expand it to Asia Pacific countries, Latin America, and also I had teams in India, Israel, all over the world. So to not only just managing a team, but actually build a business locally, that is something kind of rare because I launched over 7, 8 countries. So that globalization is second label. And the third one is that people like my investor background because for example that we get on the audit committee, the first thing is, have you done audit before? Have you worked with auditor before, right? Have you looked at the statements? Yes, as an investor you look at all of them as a hawk like a hawk, right? So you want to make sure that all the company you invest in a healthy state. So those are also important experience as well. And of course when we check box all the experience or capabilities, you're really looking at the soft
yes.
qualities, whether there's a fit. So that's why I love all the boards I've served right now. I serve on the board of GIA, which is the world's largest gemstone evaluation and research and education organizations, being around almost 100 years. And then all the organization's passion is to protect consumers.
Yeah.
And then I'm also on the board of an AI company, Qubit AI, and on nonprofit, and get involved in so many organizations, do as much as I can.
Excellent. So I think we're almost out of time. Can you give me sort of your biggest tip for young women who are watching you, or even women my age who are watching you and wanting to learn from how you've built your career? And what are some of the tips you'd have for us?
So I never categorize myself, right? So in the past, people ask me, how do you switch from operating to VC to professor, or how did you actually, my undergrad was econ and then I got computer science later. So how do you actually from econ to computer science, how do you do this? So the thing is that never really cap yourself with those labels. I think we all have a potential. It sounds like cliche, but actually it's true. Is that if you pick something that you really, really passionate about, you have a lot of tremendous energy to do
Yeah.
it, right? You don't feel tired, you don't feel like it's a grind. And then I mentioned making positive changes, making positive impacts, and that also give you recharging you because you feel like what you're doing is really meaningful. And the last thing is you really want to do it with the people that you admire and appreciate. That's really important because we always hear people say, hey, I got this job, I quit because I don't really like my boss or the people I work with, right? So end of the day, doing things you love and doing things that are meaningful and doing the things with people that you really love. And that give you, I think, fulfillment of life.
That's beautiful. I want my adult children to hear this. I'm going to send it to them the minute it's live. Thank you so much. If somebody wants to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
So LinkedIn is the best way to contact me, and then we can share our background. And I also have Candidly, and then if you reach out to me, mention you came from this podcast, and then I will respond.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for the insights today that are so right on time. We needed to hear from you, and I feel like we're all walking away with a long list of things that we can now dig into, learn from, and make our lives even better. So thank you, Lake.
Oh, thank you.